Tuesday, June 23rd. How is everyone? Welcome to another edition of Cape Ann Today. I'm joined, as always, by Heather Atwood. We've had a couple great conversations to share with you today, including Taylor Bradford, who just came from the Gloucester High School's graduation.
Yeah, the drive-in graduation. And she did a story in the Gloucester Times. We covered it, 1623 covered it. Actually, we produced a video. But Taylor has some great responses to what was actually happening on the ground there in the parking lot on Sunday.
And this actually concludes the longest graduation ceremony. I think it's been about 3 or 4 months for the class of 2020 this year. So congrats, grads.
Last night, I had the great opportunity to go down to O'Malley Innovation Middle School, not for a middle school event, but for the Gloucester High School's drive-in graduation celebration. So the evening turned out to be, I got there around 8 o'clock in the afternoon, evening, to cars pulling in, kind of making their spot. Police officers were there to kind of instruct people where to go. Principal James Cook was helping people navigate and get to their assigned little spots. And, what was presented in front of them was this giant inflatable screen that right behind it, the sun was setting. It was picturesque. Students were sitting on top of their cars. Family members were sitting around cheering. Horns were honking. And so, good 30 minutes before the event even started, people were having a blast and really social distancing. Stayed their respective cars and hung out. But what kind of followed that was a really well put together video of not only speeches of different people representing the student body, the administration from the city and from the school, but also just a collage of photos of each graduating senior. And so people could tune in on the radio station of their car. So people would tune in and you could just kind of go from car to car and hear each person kind of tuning in and listening and just being with their loved ones during this time. So it was a beautiful weather. Everyone was really just kind of hanging out. Some people brought food. I know I was able to speak with one family where it was Father's Day yesterday as well. And so the father said it was his best Father's Day present ever, was to be able to see his son kind of experience this amidst so much hardship, because he had also graduated from Gloucester High back in the day. And so they kind of celebrated this family thing. So there's a lot of things to celebrate this past weekend, and I know that their celebration continues as we go and look towards graduation ceremony in person later in August. So
were the cars decorated? Were the kids wearing caps and gowns? Like what did the scene look like?
Yeah, so some of them were. I met a couple people who were wearing their hats, but it was actually pretty low key. Not many people were wearing their traditional kind of robes that you might think. I think they're kind of keeping those in the closet and all well maintained for August. But people were definitely dressed up, and you had the classic people kind of sitting on the hoods of the hoods of their cars or their seats, either with friends, significant others, or family members, just kind of enjoying the scene. It's very kind of taking you back to one of those classic movies where people would do this all the time. So it was kind of cool to be brought back to a different era and see what it was kind of like. But yeah, people weren't really dressed up, but it was, pretty exciting. People had music, decorated cars, and people had lights strewn across their car, which was really fun. So lots of beach chairs so each person had their own kind of vibe that they wanted to go for, but overall it's a pretty respectful and just really calm environment. So
and you mentioned before that you think that O'Malley should be hosting drive-in movies all summer long, right?
It went so smoothly from my perspective, right? It's a limited perspective, but it went so smoothly and people really stuck to their cars. And so if people are looking to get outside in the weather, I'm curious to know how much this thing cost to put this on. So it's definitely something I want to ask the city and the school. But it seems like a great opportunity to kind of bring people together when they're kind of asked to be stood apart for a while. So,
right.
Yeah.
So what are you working on next, Taylor, this week?
So still some school stuff in the mix for this week. So Superintendent Dr. Richard Sapphire is going to be retiring this month. And so Ben Lummis is the kind of elected new superintendent. Of course, he has to sign a contract with the Gloucester School Committee to finalize all of that. So that is in the books for this Wednesday school committee that's happening over Zoom. So we're gonna see. He said in the initial vote that he would like to take on and accept the position. But again, they're negotiating that contract and seeing what the details of that might look like. So that's kind of what I've got in the books for right now. Still kind of searching the area, searching here and what's going on in the city as we enter into a pretty warm week here in Gloucester. So I'm sure people are going to be out and about enjoying the ocean when they can, especially for the students who are, wrapping up their school year and just really kind of trying to get out of that house that they have been confined in for so long during the pandemic. So
actually, Corey, you're wrong, because the class of 2020 Gloucester High School still has another potential graduation in August, right? So the live one is still scheduled for August. We don't know if it will happen, but graduation goes on.
Yeah, so graduation officially is going to last longer than the pandemic, which is amazing. So, all right, we had another really good conversation today with Andrew Marques. He is from Cape Ann Savings Bank. Heather and I have tapped his shoulder a few times during the COVID-19 outbreak on small business relief in the form of PPP loans and EIDL loans. He's been a treasure trove of information for us. So we had a great conversation with him.
Yes, there are a lot of really important updates on the PPP loan in particular, so people really need to pay attention.
I did want to share some of the new updates regarding the SBA PPP loan program. There's some really important changes since it all was launched, and the changes have been coming frequently, and it's a lot to keep track of, but we're working hard, as all the banks are, to communicate that information and make sure we're staying on top of it. So some of the really big changes at the top level of the loan programs are the ratio of the use of funds, which is really important. That's changed significantly from originally 75% of the loan amount had to be used for actual payroll and payroll related expenses, and 25% could be used for other qualifying expenses, which includes rent or mortgage interest payments. It also includes interest payments, and this is some clarification that came out after the fact too, but interest payments for personal property. So if you have truck loans, auto loans, equipment loans for your business specifically, that interest expense only can be included in the qualifying expenses. And so the loan terms were extended from 2 years to 5 years. So any loans that were written before June 5th are still a 2-year loan. So any portion that's not forgiven after the fact can be repaid over a 2-year time period after the deferred payments. Loans written after June 5th are automatically have a 5-year term, so that extends the time period to pay back anything that's not forgiven. So that's an important note. Banks and borrowers have to agree to extend the term if it was originally a 2-year loan. So if you do have a loan, definitely reach out to your bank and see if it's something you can extend. But we're really handling that after the forgiveness portion to see how much of the loan might be left over. The application process is obviously on the front of everyone's mind right now, and that is still a little bit up in the air. They've been making small changes along the way. So they released the initial application, which is, I think it's 13 pages. It includes multiple pages of instructions, worksheets, and then of course the actual application form to be submitted to the bank. They've adjusted this process a little bit and released a new EZ application. So if you think of your tax return, how they have a 1040 and then 1040 EZ, similar idea to streamline the process for less involved business structures. So if you're a sole proprietor, you can most likely go right for that EZ form. If you don't have employees, it's not something you have to calculate. Also, there's a number of qualifications to go forward with the EZ form. If you didn't reduce any salaries, if you maintain the same number of employees. So it really just a way to bypass the very complicated calculation process. there. So that's some exciting news. It will help streamline the forgiveness application process for a large portion of the borrowers, especially people that are so focused on, keeping their business afloat and operating and navigating the post-COVID-19 business world at this point.
Andrew, I have one question. As I understand it, the forgiveness period has been extended to December. It had been the end of June. Is that right?
Yeah, so that's another important point. Thanks for bringing that up. So originally, the qualifying period was 8 weeks after the loan was funded. So all the employment expenses and all the qualifying expenses were to be calculated within that 8-week period. And they have a sliding scale based on the business's pay period, which was another adjustment they made after the fact. But they've extended that across the board for all borrowers to 24 weeks. So it's an additional 16 weeks to use that money. So people can still opt into the 8 weeks if that's the guidelines they were following and they want to submit the forgiveness application, everything's been spent. They can still do the 8-week period, but all loans have been extended to 24 weeks. And then there's an important safe harbor qualifying rule. So this basically tries to encompass the challenges that a lot of businesses had with employment, and shutdowns for the businesses. So if you're able to reach your number of full-time equivalent employees that you had prior to the outbreak and the shutdowns by December 31st, any reductions in that time period, there's a whole list of rules and calculations, but you're able to basically ramp your business back up to where it was pre-COVID, you qualify under the safe harbor. So it eliminates any reductions in forgiveness. And so that was extended out to December 31st. But the deadline for banks to submit a new PPP application is still June 30th. So that's coming up next week. If anyone's watching this and is kind of thinking about it, I would definitely reach out to your bank and submit that this week, because the money's going to freeze June 30th, the end of this month.
So Andrew, if you've already done this once, can you reapply?
No, the calculation for the loan itself hasn't changed. It's still based on your average monthly payroll times a factor of 2.5. So there's no additional money available with the changes. They've basically made it more flexible to qualify for forgiveness to help compensate for the challenges that businesses have had, bringing employees back, and of course reopening as the phases were announced after the loan program launched there too. So they've basically adjusted the rules to be a little more flexible to allow businesses to use the funds as intended within the loan program.
Gotcha.
So I have one more question about the safe harbor provisions. As I read it, it looked as if there's a special forgiveness for people who are having a hard time finding qualified employees, because that's been an issue, and also for businesses that are having a hard time reopening because of social distancing. So, like for instance, restaurants that just can't manage the 6 feet apart thing. So is that what you understand, that there's, if they can prove these 2 points, that they get a reduction in their forgiveness, or yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a number of factors that go into safe harbor, but a good example is if someone resigned or had to be fired during it. Employers and employees, things change. It's complicated. People are let go, people are laid off, businesses need to rehire, and there's not always people that are readily available. So in recognizing that there is a huge concern in having that number of full-time employees or equivalents within the business, they have adjusted that safe harbor rule to basically take that into account. So a good example is if you offered an employee to come back after they were laid off, and they decide not to come back. If you have that documented and it was a good faith offer, the same number of hours at the same rate, and you have that all documented, you can submit that with the forgiveness application, and you're not going to be hurt by that employee, within that qualifying period. So the qualifying period is 24 weeks, but you have until December 31st to ramp up to the full operation. So if there was, it's a little complicated, and this is where we're still kind of waiting for some answers here and really how to calculate this, but there's more and more information coming out every day from the SBA office regarding that. And also it does take into account challenges in reopening businesses and being able to hire people in that capacity too. So there's tons of resources on the Treasury and SBA website that really dive deep into those kind of complicated topics, and without kind of boring everyone here today, that's what I would suggest is go check out those resources. But there are safe harbors available to address those challenges that employers have managing their payroll and number of employees through this whole pandemic.
Yeah, and I imagine, just one issue would be employees nervous about coming back, for their own health and exposure. So
Right.
I don't know how high a rate that is, but it's certainly got to be a factor.
Yep, and that definitely comes into account in the safe harbor rule. So if anyone is offered the job but either wants a reduction in hours because of their concerns there, or if they have childcare or health or primary care issues at home, that's something that's taken into account as well.
Right. Great.
Another piece of news coming out of the SBA was reopening of the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. So they put a freeze on that. They basically weren't accepting applications for a number of weeks. It may have been months, but they had so much demand right from the get-go. They needed a lot of time to get through that pipeline. They've reopened that portal so that those loans are still available, and borrowers that have taken the economic injury disaster loans can qualify for Paycheck Protection Program loans and vice versa. So they're not mutually exclusive. The business can use both as the working capital options to keep their business going and their working capital flush. There's a lot fewer restrictions on the IDA loans, but there's no opportunity for forgiveness there. It's up to a 30-year loan at a low fixed interest rate. So it's a good program that they've relaunched and reopened, and they're making those funds available as well there too. So it's another option for business owners looking to support their need for capital to pay for the expenses while revenue is down at this point.
And these are distributed through what offices, Andrew?
This is through the SBA Disaster Office.
Okay.
So I believe the link is sba.gov/disaster. And that's where you can find the application for that.
Great. And the PPP, they can go to their local banks, including you guys, right?
Yep. Any federally insured bank was eligible to give these loans. Some banks chose not to, but any SBA partner bank was certainly doing them, and there's a number of them around Cape Ann in Massachusetts, so including Cape Ann Savings Bank.
One thing that Andrew did not touch upon, and people should read up on this, is that under this new PPP Act that was passed in June 5th, employers will be able to defer their share of the Social Security payroll taxes until the first half will be due in December 2021, and the second half December 2022. So that's kind of an important piece for employers to know about.
Yeah, and you have 1 week to act now, small business owners, because the application deadline is June 30th. So we have a really special show for you coming tomorrow. Joel Palmisano, one of the 4 kids who's done good speaks with Heather and I. It is a long interview. It's about half an hour, all Fiesta. It's all the Fiesta you might need for this year. And it was a great chat. And we're actually going to be talking to him much more frequently to start sharing all these stories. But what stood out to you, Heather?
Oh, what stood out? Well, of course, he won the Greasy Pole. He and his brother are both Greasy Pole winners. So to hear somebody actually talk about that experience was really moving.
Have a great Tuesday. We'll see you tomorrow.